Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Tim Greater.
So I'd like to take a call on behalf of my colleague, the Honourable Murray McCully, and focus not on foreign policy issues, but on budgetary control and efficiency measures that we're seeking to introduce into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and into the administration of our overseas development assistance. And I know it's a shock for some of the members on the opposite side who've been used to truckloads of money pouring in through the front door to the point where core government expenditure went from $32 billion in 2000 to $60 billion in 2009. But we are determined to get on top of this problem, Mr. Chairman. We are determined to ensure that the New Zealand public, which has gone through, difficult times, first of all, an anemic 0.9% average growth rate in each of the last 3 years of Labour's run at office, 1/3 the level of economic growth in Australia. But we are determined to avoid a situation where more money is considered to be the answer to all problems, and we've seen once you get to that critical point that Greece, Spain and other countries have got to, it's an extremely hard road back. Now, Foreign Affairs and the Ministry is no exception to this. Actually, they've come off relatively lightly, I think, in terms of expenditure control in the course of our first 14-15 months in office. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs budget has grown from $439 million approximately in 2009-2010 to approximately $500 million in 2010-2011 allocation. And the aid expenditure increases are quite considerable. They've gone from $498 million back in 2008-09 to a allocation this year, 2010-11, of $525 million. So that's in excess of $1 billion, and I think it's a fairly generous allocation to the ministry. But having said that, this government is determined to ensure that we conduct a value for money exercise on the ministry, as in all government agencies, because we are using other people's money. They are called taxpayers' money, and we are determined that these people get value for money out of their expenditure. So if we have a situation, for example, with respect to aid, where we have reintegrated the aid administration back into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where it should have been all along, the idea that one could completely divorce foreign policy conclusions from aid considerations was always a fantasy. We have insisted that the administration costs be cut by 12% over the next few years, Mr. Chairman, and we are on a course of action to ensure that aid effectiveness is absolutely at the forefront of the ministry's responsibilities. We are trying to refocus on sustainable economic development, which is the absolute key, particularly in the region where the bulk of our money is spent, in the Pacific, and trying to refocus on that objective. And I should also say that part of that process is now to turn attention to adaptation and mitigation in the context of climate change. If I momentarily put on my other hat as the International Negotiations Minister on Climate Change, we're doing this in good faith. I was recently in the Maldives at a meeting of climate change ministers and met there the Samoan minister responsible, and met him at a previous meeting of the Progressives group of countries, and he put to me, on behalf of the Samoan government, a very interesting proposal to use coconut husks and as the input to a biofuels industry in the context of renewable energy, and we were able to take that forward, and also very interesting discussions with the young and extraordinarily able President of the Maldives, Mr. Chairman. So we're moving on a variety of fronts to refocus the aid, and the Minister will be assisted by an independent and voluntary advisory group. So we'll ensure that we hear and listen to outside views as we move forward. Now, within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in terms of its aid administration, in terms of its administration of public monies, we're similarly ensuring that we will get value for money. And we're doing this in a variety of ways, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Chairman Gross.
First of all, with respect to integrated planning, we have conducted the first phase of what will be an ongoing exercise under the title of a New Zealand Inc. strategy, in which we're attempting to try and join the dots of agencies which generally have worked pretty well together, but not in all cases. We're trying to make it more systematic. And we will be ensuring that the agency's chiefs are responsible for drawing up long-range country strategies, and I hope that we'll be able to reassure the New Zealand public in the months to come that they will have achieved greater value for money from the obvious quite high expenses incurred in having our overseas diplomats there represented in some 39 to 40 countries. We're also trialling a hubs and spokes model in terms of reducing back office costs. We'll run that out in Europe in the first instance, which will be totally consistent with this government's insistence on cutting backroom office expenses and putting more in terms of what the front shop operates at. And I think that that will also lead in due course to improved effectiveness. There's a variety of other measures we're putting in place to try and ensure that we get value for money out of this $1 billion plus that the Ministry is responsible for in all of its operations, aid and otherwise. And I'm very confident, Mr. Chairman, that when we come to the people of New Zealand and seek their support for another term, that on this front, as on the front of all government expenditure, we will be able to look them in the eye and say, you got value for money out of this government.
The question is that